please remember to leave a like, a comment, share the video about, and if you haven't already, subscribe. Thank you. Well, isn't this just fantastic?
Captain's Log, Subdate 23.1114.5. As we are getting closer and closer to the month of Merry Meggy Moistmas, I've been knuckling down with content production for all of you wonderful people. To help with the stress though, the Auditor has taken it upon himself to castrate the NPC crew in front of me, which I found quite amusing. Ever since Marvel's Endgame for Avengers, I have made it a point to not watch much in the way of superhero movies. The reason why is because I felt that they were starting to become repetitive. They tried to deviate from the formula by taking powers away from that of the superhero, but the story was always the same, and I found it exhausting, a way of introducing character development and growth. So Endgame seemed to be the right time to walk away. Well, it was meant to be the end of Phase 3, but I believe the second Spider-Man movie became the official end of Phase 3. Since then, Marvel has pushed on with Disney Plus TV shows, many of which have been panned quite critically, and movies that have not done anywhere near as well as they could have done because they have pushed really crap stories from rich source material or given us characters we're not as interested in under the guise of we clearly need it. I'll be honest, from an outsider's perspective now, it just looks like you're trying to tick every single box for every diversity quota so you can make as much merch for the sake of inclusivity, which makes sense. Theme parks will be where the money's made as well, although I would argue your shareholders are getting slightly smaller dividends at present. Another issue with Phase 4 is that the story itself isn't really coalescing. They're building towards something, and if you really do look at this from the outside, none of the stories tie in that well. Yeah, I bothered to have a little look. It doesn't look anywhere near as fluid or flow as well as that of Phases 1, 2 and 3 that built towards something and had the conclusion. This seems to be a case of we're scrambling to get there quicker. Many things will undoubtedly have caused issues over the past few years. COVID certainly did not help, although you would have thought with COVID, more people watching streaming platforms, perhaps they relied a bit too much on that. The Screen Actors Guild writers and actors strikes going on that have now ended, that would have undoubtedly not helped either. But Disney, the engine itself, because it owns such a monopoly in a particular area, they are definitely pushing things that they shouldn't be pushing. I'll give you an example. When tragically Chadwick Boseman passed away, his family said recast him. Did they? No. They instead killed him in the movie and had his sister take over. The actress who portrays his sister is not very well liked because of COVID-related commentary, I believe. But also, they wanted the Black Panther to live on in that way. The movie gave an opportunity for a female lead, and that's what they wanted. A movie I was a bit surprised they bothered with has just been released. The Marvel, the sequel to Captain Marvel. I had thought they were going to do Captain Marvel 2, but I wasn't entirely convinced they could give us anything that could, well, surpass in acting quality to RoboCop 3. And I mention RoboCop explicitly because Brie Larson's portrayal has been somebody who has no humanity, and that did not work out so well when Captain Marvel came out, regardless of the money it made, because her wooden delivery system and her being the ace in the hole in Endgame, just turning up and taking Thanos' attack up until the Infinity Stone was punched into her face, of course, made her look even more and pointlessly OP. Something I noticed though with the Marvels was that they have approached the promotion of this movie differently to that of the previous one, well, Captain Marvel, in the sense that they didn't really promote this. I barely saw any ads of this movie. I have not seen many billboards. I have not seen any bus posters for this movie, either because they are relying on Brie Larson's name or the Marvel engine to simply promote itself, or because they genuinely don't have faith in this movie, but they want to put it out anyway because another quota can be hit. 3 female leads all covering different races, which sounds like a weak point to point out, but that is a point they will use to make their point. It is annoyingly a point of criticism because it is the very point Marvel often now push, and it is a point of criticism because we're not getting quality in product, you are providing quantity in product. I firmly believe in less is more, which is why I upload daily. Yes, I am not a hypocrite. I'm a slave for views. But with this, we have some interesting commentary concerning the Marvel, how it's debuted, how it's done gross-wise, and what this means, because there are some valid points that need to be raised, and that's where we're going to go. This has been my TED Talk, by the way, to start the video. If you didn't like it, I'm sorry, but I like to waffle. On November the 8th, 2023, The Quartering, who is very much against Brie Larson at everything she does, tweeted, "The Marvels debuts with a 54% rotten score on Rotten Tomatoes, damn sexist movie reviewers." At that point, it had 41 reviews and a 54% review rating from the officials. Now, years ago, when Captain Marvel came out, Rotten Tomato changed its system for leaving reviews because review bombing was quite common at this point, and it seemed to be a particular type of movie pushing a particular type of message, where the strong woman was always against the straight white man, and the straight white man was the bad guy, typically an Englishman, because we are great villains. We have the voice for it, a natural cadence that works with the depth, and we just look like evil buggers, really. Since then, and we're now on the 14th of November, it is 62% from 289 reviews with an audience score of 84%. And just for the sake of context, Captain Marvel had a 79% Rotten Tomatoes score from 553 reviews. This has less reviews than last time, and it has over 100,000 reviews from the audience, and it sits at 45%. Apparently the critical consensus with both, they're funny. Yeah, humorous and funny. I disagree, but only because I had to suffer Captain Marvel, and the first thing I thought was, I've seen her do better work on Skull Island. Because understandably many articles are going to write reviews, I thought I'd provide one from Vox. The Marvel's goofy and bold shows there's still some magic left in the MCU. Beneath a layer of slapstick, The Marvels is a warning about hero worship, something I'm okay with as a message if that is the truth. The article starts though by highlighting The Eternals, Ant-Man Quantumania, Thor Love and Thunder. It doesn't mention a few of the TV shows that kind of stunk, but it mentioned those movies. You could argue Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness wasn't great, and they did wander dirty, and they know I'm right. It acknowledges that The Marvels hasn't really been marketed all that well. A large part of this has been attributed to the actors' strike. If that were the case, you'd think Marvel would want to make the most of the opportunity to promote it at a more opportune moment, like several months down the road. Once the strike was confirmed to be over, they could then get the engine up and running again. But, and I'm sure many of you have seen them before, Marvel operate with schedule, which often get pushed back. It's quite common, so I don't know why they couldn't this time. One really important point that might well be what's harming Marvel right now, and it's mentioned in the review, is that Marvel's is essentially asking fans for endgame level commitment to stories that don't have the same kind of payoff nor the same kind of excitement. At the heart of this batch of films is a tiring and complicated concept called the multiverse, which more or less means there's an infinite number of parallel universes. I think as far as the multiverse goes, the payoff for its involvement has been quite minimal, and if anything, just opens up while opportunity for things like X-Men and cast from other franchises within Marvel's back catalogue, like for example I mentioned the X-Men explicitly there, the Fantastic Four as well. The reality is the payoff hasn't been all that great, and many involved have been done quite dirty. Although, and while I don't watch superhero movies, I have paid attention to Loki, which has been done very well, and I like how it's ended, to be honest. Another key point in the article that I think is worth highlighting is the optics of a white woman superhero girl bossing a planet too hard and failing to recognize how her actions affect other people isn't lost on me. This is a point of highlighting the horrendous character development in Captain Marvel, which is why this movie is seen as a way of trying to humanize her, which is very hard to do when you have somebody that is recognized as the most powerful character so far in the MCU. The article overall is a bit too long, especially when you still can't tell, according to the review, what Carol Danvers actually wants. When it came to character development for like Tony Stark, you know what he wants. Steve Rogers, you know what he wants. In fact, for most of the heroes from phases 1-3, you knew what they wanted, or what they wanted to be, or what they wanted to accomplish. With Carol Danvers, we still don't know, and that is recognized in that review. Somebody's been very vocal, got a whole article devoted to his perspective about the MCU state, or Stephen King, the author, who had tweeted, "I don't go to MCU movies, don't care for them, but I find this barely masked gloating over the low box office for the Marvels very unpleasant. Why gloat over failure? There are answers to this, but if you want to help it not fail, I highly recommend you go and watch it." But go figure, somebody woke that won't go and watch something that could be argued to be in that ballpark as well. Now, I have also noticed he did tweet later some of the rejection to The Marvels maybe adolescent fanboy hate, yuck girls. This is quite an interesting thing for me because many have pointed out that Stephen King is very woke these days. He's very anti-MAGA. He tweets so much pro-Democrat and anti-Trump stuff. It's not surprising he would lean in favor of hating on anyone that is being critical of a movie under the guise of "I will pigeonhole you for this." I find this quite fascinating from a personal stance because it is disingenuous to think that it's just because guys don't want to watch it. I would argue the vast majority of those that read comics and these movies will be male, the majority. However, if you want them to keep coming back, don't alienate them from the product. I guess what's amusing is in the replies to his tweets, there are women outright stating the movie sucked, and they're getting a lot of likes and not much blowback, so I'm inclined to believe he isn't paying attention to because they're the wrong thing types. No doubt he'll pigeonhole them as MAGA, and that's bad. Sorry. So how bad was the opening weekend for the Marvels? Well, on record, it is now the lowest grossing MCU opening weekend in their 15-year history. In 2008, The Incredible Hulk opened with $55.4 million. It was only at that time the MCU's second official installment, as the original Hulk movie is not included. The Marvels opened with a turnover of $47 million. It can be attributed to the Screen Actors Guild's strike. Absolutely, SAG-AFTRA, is that it? Yes, that can certainly be a factor in this, but knowing Disney and Marvel, they could have pushed the movie back. It is believed, though, that the final domestic total will be less than the opening weekend for the predecessor, which is also true. It opened with a 34% decrease on Eternals and 15% below that of The Incredible Hulk. It was also below that of, for example, the DCEU movies Black Adam and The Flash. Flash took $55 million its opening weekend and Black Adam took $67 million. Demographics, though, interestingly here, for the Marvels, it was 61% male, which is higher than Captain Marvel, which was 55%. 67% older than 25, which is slightly older than Captain Marvel with 63%. Premium formats comprised of 45% of the box office, which is higher than Captain Marvel at 34%. Overseas and globally, opened to the tune of $110 million. 75% below the global opening for Captain Marvel's 2019 release, which was 455. There are many theories as to why this bombed in its opening weekend, that is. It could be superhero fatigue, which I do believe is the case. It could be poor writing, but I'm not sure on that front. Marvel have been fairly consistent regardless of the message they're pushing. Backlash aimed at the movie from those who are more conservative, perhaps. But if it was superhero fatigue, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse wouldn't have done as well. There are arguments that it's not that and it's something different. Is this an indicator perhaps the MCU needs to put the brakes on a bit? The answer is yes, because they now know there are lines, whether it be writers related, screen actors related, whether it be fatigue related. They know now they can't just keep pushing to continually push. They have to take their time. But since Marvel like to tee up all their projects within a phase, it's unlikely to, at the moment, deter them when they know long term they can still do well regardless of it failing. With a budget of $270 million, even with limited promotion, the movie has to make a considerable amount to break even. It is believed that the Marvels will end its domestic run at $150 million if it is lucky. What I guess is amusing this time is you're going to have to find creative ways to blame because you can't even use review bombing this time. It didn't work. This time people just haven't turned up yet. Because that's not to say they won't. Only way of knowing will be over the next 2 to 3 weeks. Because if it starts to nosedive, then you know something is wrong with the product. Whether Marvel or Disney will acknowledge that is a different entity entirely. And also unlikely. They really do like to just push things that people don't want. Cough, cough. Snow White. Cough, cough. Erasing dwarves. Cough, cough.